Legs and hips and body, let's get them, girls. Addy.
Hey everybody, welcome to my channel. I'm Rafael and I am here to review episode 4 of The Real Housewives Who Deserve Lunchables of Atlanta. We start the episode off with Marlo showing up to the middle of this open land where we see a house getting rebuilt on, and I'm like, okay, maybe she's here to check out her second home or something. But no, the editors were quick to tell us not Marlo's home at the bottom of the screen. So I'm thinking, what are we doing here then? Because all I see is dirt and grass, aka Neverland. So Marlo, she gets out of the car, she meets up with this man named Patrick, who's her builder, and he has a map layout of what she wants her house to look like when she's done building it from the ground up. And I'm like, not you too, Marlo. Not you. I just mentioned this in my last review to The Real Housewives of Beverly Hills with Crystal, how that's like a plan B on this show at this point. When you have nothing really going on in your life, you're like, you know what? My husband isn't cheating on me. I have no drama on this show with any of the other women. You know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna build a fucking house. So I'm assuming that's what Marlo's doing. She starts looking at the map layout that Patrick has brought her, and she's like, I love it, Patrick. I love it. It's huge. It's wonderful. It's amazing. It's everything I imagine. All of my YSL purses are gonna fit in there. My Chanel bags, my Louis Vuitton bags, my Gucci bags, everything is gonna fit in that huge closet. I love it. But you know what, Patrick? I know 2 women on the show that have history building houses, and I'm gonna introduce you to them because I think that they could help us. And I'm like, okay, who are these 2 women, Marlo? And come to find out, it's Sheree and Kenya. And I'm like, really, Marlo? Those 2 are gonna be the help that you use to build your house? All right, I mean, if you go down Kenya's route, maybe by season 17, 18, possibly 19, your house will be done. But if you go down Sheree's path and follow her advice, maybe by season 30, maybe season 45, if you're lucky, maybe your house will be done by then. So, I mean, I don't know. Both choices, blah. And what I find so funny is that Sheree was getting out the car with so much confidence, as if she was going to give Marlo the best advice in the world on how to build a house, as if it didn't take her 50 years to build chateaus she was on layaway. But okay, I mean, she got it done regardless. So her and Kenya, they meet up with Marlo and Patrick. And was it just me, or there was some type of spark between Kenya and Patrick? I mean, a small spark, because Kenya was flirting with him and she was like, oh, I mean, Patrick, I like the layout that you have for Marlo. It's really nice. I like the layout. Maybe you should come to my house and inspect it from the inside. You know, maybe you could come through the back door, that is, and you could come through my garage, or whatever way you want. I mean, either way, whatever way you want to come in, I'll allow you if you want. You could come inspect it. And I'm like, interesting. I would like to see it. So then Marlo's like, okay, Patrick, you could go. I mean, your time here is done. Your 30 seconds of camera time is done. So Patrick, he disappears, and she's left with Kenya and Sheree. And she's like, oh, I mean, do you like my land? Do you like the land? I mean, I like the location. And they're like, but Marlo, why did you choose this location? I mean, it's so far away from everything. And why would you come here? And Marlo's like, well, I mean, you 2 are always assuming that I have so much money, especially you, Kenya. You always assume I have all this money. So, I mean, I don't. So I don't know where these assumptions come from. So I chose this location because I could afford it. And I'm like, now, Marlo, I mean, Kenya doesn't necessarily say that you're the richest one or anything, or that she's always like, oh, Marlo has this or Marlo has that. This all comes out of your mouth. You have been constantly for years saying that you have this, you have that, you could afford this. So of course we just assume that you have money. How? We don't know. And the fact that she's upset that, oh, I don't get why people are so nosy, or why Kenya or anybody wants to know, well, how I get my money or where I get my money from. It'll be completely different if you were still a friend of the show and you were in the background and you didn't really have to say much. But now that you're in the main spotlight and you're a housewife, of course the cast members and the audience are gonna have questions like, Marlo has been getting money for all these years, but we never really got a clear explanation. Now that she has a main spot on the show, we want answers. So I mean, what do you want? You can't expect to have all this limelight and then expect no questions or anything towards you. But she goes on to talk about the trip that they're all about to take to New York for Candy and her play, and she goes on to tell Sheree, so I mean, are you gonna meet up with Tyrone? I mean, are you gonna do anything with him? And then Sheree's like, he's on house arrest and he can't leave too far from where he's at unless he sends in a request to see if he's allowed to go to New York. And I'm like, you see, Sheree, you need to be worried about whether Tyrone is even granted permission to walk down the street. But no, you're too busy worrying about whether Ralph is gay or not. Priorities. So then Marlo, she moves over to Kenya. She's like, Kenya, so are you going to go visit Mark while you're in New York? What's that about? Kenya's like, no. I'm going to send the babysitter with baby Brooklyn to go spend time with them. Like, I'm going to send her. She could drop her off. That's that. I'm not going to meet up with Mark. And Kenya, yeah, it's best that you don't go and meet up with that man face to face, because who knows what type of tricks and manipulations and schemes he has just ready ready to spring in your face and ready to like reel you in and mess you up mentally again. We head over to Candy's house, and we should have known how this scene was gonna play out just by Todd's shirt alone that had a huge no on his chest. So they're both walking around the neighborhood, and was it just me, or was this whole scene just very awkward? I mean, I'm not sure. I don't know if it was the tension or if it was just awkwardly filmed. Maybe because there was no background music, nothing, but they were both just walking like, oh, okay, so where should we walk to next? Okay, let's go film that way. Like, they were just walking so awkwardly. I'm like, okay, can we move on? And then Candy, she kind of broke the ice. She started talking about her play in New York, and she's like,
well, Todd, I want to get attention to my play. I want to get butts in the seats. I think that you should invite the husbands over to New York so we can watch the play. What do you think, Todd?
and Todd is just like, you know what? I think that sounds like a good idea. And maybe while we're at it, maybe we should swing over to New Jersey and check out Teresa and see if Melissa's still going to be on the next season of The Real Housewives of New Jersey. What do you think? Maybe we should go to the condo. And Candy's just like,
well, Todd, I don't really feel like going to the condo. I like going to my hotel and messing it up and doing whatever I want to do and, just being me. I don't feel like going to your condo.
and Todd is just like, come on, dude. Seriously, it's always about you, and what you want. And I'm like, Todd, I think I finally came up with a solution, and why Todd is acting like this about this condo and he's making it a big deal is because this condo is something that Todd can call his pride and joy. This is something that he has no affiliation with Candy whatsoever. Like, he could say, oh, this is mine. I helped myself to get this on my own without Candy, without her money, without any type of help from Candy. This is all Todd over here. So that's probably why he just doesn't want to let it go, because as soon as he lets it go, he's probably going to think like, okay, what do I have that is not attached to Candy? That's probably why he has this condo so far up his ass. And it's understandable, again, because he's kind of like in Candy's shadow in his head, unfortunately. But Candy, she doesn't see it that way. She's like, I don't want that. That's kind of like rewrapping a gift from your ex and giving it to me. And I agree with her. I mean, Todd, again, how are you going to have something that you had with your ex and try to make this a thing with your now wife? Like, no, especially knowing the history of whatever you and her did in that room. No, that's not going to happen. We head over to the circus, aka Drew and Ralph's home, and we see all 2,500 of their assistants, and we see them just running around all through the house as if they're doing some type of scavenger hunt. And it reminded me of one of those old school Scooby-Doo cartoon chase scenes where they're all taking turns running through the doors with the background music. And speaking of assistants, we see Anthony. You know Anthony, the one from last week, the messy one. He's walking around through the house, doing whatever he was doing. And then he spots a camera. I'm assuming he didn't know they were filming. He spots a camera. He's like, oh, fuck. He turns the other way quickly and he runs to try to hide. And I'm like, no, what happened now, Anthony? What happened? What did Drew say to you that she put a fire under your ass all of a sudden? Now you don't want to be in front of the camera. Last week, you had no problem putting everybody's business out there. Now, all of a sudden, he wants to hide. What's the problem? No, let's continue the issue now. So then Drew, in the confessional, the producer's like, so Drew, please tell me, what do you mean by probation? Like, what does that mean? And Drew's just like, well, probation, it's going to take time for, Anthony to change and stuff, just to see if his behavior changes. And I'm like, but Drew, it's different if he did something like, like he dropped a cup or something, or he's always being clumsy, something like that. But he talked about your husband, allegedly, and he put these rumors out, allegedly, and you're okay with that? Like, that's enough to give you probation? I mean, if that's the case, then shit, Drew, I wanna work for you too and get away with everything. And then speaking of, we see Dr. Ken. So Dr. Ken is Ralph and Drew's marriage counselor, right? He gets in there. They sit down to all three of them to sit down to have a counseling session. And Dr. Ken, he starts off with Ralph, and he's like, so Ralph and Drew, both of you had like a little dinner thing or whatever recently, right? Tell me about that. And Ralph, he goes on to paint this beautiful rainbow story of everything went perfect. Everything was fine. Like, I gave my wife the best. I mean, it was everything. I mean, there was roses, there was bottles of champagne, the expensive champagne. I gave her a foot rub. I gave her a back massage. She looks so beautiful. I treated her like the queen she is. Like, I gave her kisses, everything. And she attacked me, sir. She attacked me. I'm like, Ralph, you're like putting like 10% of the story out there. Like, explain your part in this whole mess too. And then Dr. Ken, he moves over to Drew, and I feel like he was trying to paint her out to be crazy. He was just like, so Drew, why are you constantly fucking everything up? I mean, can't you live in the moment? And I'm like, Dr. Ken, no, that's not how it works. He basically wanted Drew to like be quiet and not mention any of their issues during date night. And I'm like, no, because if you have issues or tensions with people or with your significant other, you can't just sweep it underneath the rug and just pretend like everything is okay. Like, oh, that's fine. That's how you become in a love bubble, aka Teresa from the Housewives of New Jersey. Let's learn from her mistakes. And Dr. Ken is just like, I feel like maybe it was the wrong time to talk about it. And I'm like, no, it was not. Because if that's not the right time, then when is it? I mean, Ralph, obviously, he never wants to talk about it. Ralph, he tries to overtalk to Drew. He's like, no. You know what, Dr. Ken? I gave her the best years of my life. I gave her the best steak and lobster that she could ever have. I mean, the steak and lobster didn't even compare to where Mia from Potomac used to work at that strip club where she used to serve steak and lobster. I gave her the really fine steak and lobster. And you know what? I think she deserved a Lunchable. And I'm like, a Lunchable? A Lunchable. A Lunchable. Now, was it the Lunchable, the cracker, the cheese, and the ham one? Was that the Lunchable, or was it the nachos? Because if it was the nachos, I understand. Because that's my favorite. But a Lunchable, Ralph? I mean, and Drew, she's just sitting there so flabbergasted. She's like, a Lunchable? And like, she was so shocked. And Dr. Ken, Dr. Ken he was probably thinking like, you know what? I'm probably going to retire after this. Like, he was stressed. I'm like, wow, a Lunchable. And this just further proves that if they are indeed acting for the cameras, for a storyline, for something on this show, I mean, Drew, how far are you willing to go, or how far are you willing to stoop to your low of the lowest? Because that's humiliating. I mean, if you are acting, you're willing to let your husband just humiliate you and paint out this huge picture that he could do X, Y, and Z and get away with anything. You'll just be okay with that. It's just humiliating. Because if I was Drew, I would have been like, you know what, before he even finished the word Lunchable, as soon as he would have been like, I would have been like, divorced. I would have been like, you know what, Dr. Ken, that's all the help I needed. You could get the fuck out of my house. Ralph, you too. Get out of my house. I'm divorcing you, because absolutely not a Lunchable. That is so sad. I mean, and then Dr. Ken, I don't know what kind of bullshit school he went to, because he went out to say, you know what, we're going to make a settlement here. Nobody, either one of you, are going to get into an argument for the next 30 days, you know, and if anything happens, the person who starts the issue has to be the other one's servant. And I'm like, what, a servant? Like, what do they teach in school nowadays? Like, I don't think that's how it works. And then he's like, Drew, if he wants to have sex with you for 5 times a day, you have to be okay with that. And I'm like, absolutely fucking not. Like, if I was Drew, I would have been like, okay, Dr. Ken, get the fuck out of my house. Like, no, what kind of advice is that? And he's like, Drew, if you want to make him, you know, be a good father and take care of the kids for 24 hours, then he has to do that. And I'm like, but he should be doing that already, Dr. Ken. I don't understand what type of advice he was giving her. Drew, he's setting you up for failure because I'm not understanding. We see everyone getting ready for their trip to New York, and next thing you know, we see Kenya, Sonia, and Drew get a knock at the door from this woman and this man. The woman, she has on this leather bondage outfit with some pasties and a letter in her hand. The man, he has on a harness with some leather pants and a gift bag in his hands. And I'm like, what is going on here? The woman, she proceeds to read off the letter, and come to find out, Candy sent both of them over to everyone's house to give them a little thank you gift for coming out to New York to support her play. Next thing you know, the man, he pulls out his package. Not that package, but the gift bag, and he gives it to Kenya, and Kenya's like, what is this? She digs inside the bag, and she pulls out some vibrating panties. And I'm like, Candy, what does this have to do with your play? Like, where's the correlation here? Because last time I checked, the last couple of times you mentioned your play, I thought the plot was supposed to be something inspirational, unless it has something to do with bondage or sex or even vibrating panties. I don't understand the correlation, unless she's just trying to promote her sex line, her sex toys or something. I don't get it. I was with Kenya. Kenya was just like, why couldn't we just get the playbill? Why did we have to do all of this? I mean, honestly, Candy, it was very trashy, it was classless, and it was very tasteless of you to do this. And you should have sent them to my direction. Like, I could have gave you my address. And on top of that, Candy, you did mess up by sending both of them over to Ralph's house, because you know Ralph was probably trying to get the woman with the pasties numbers. Like, he was probably like, oh yeah, Drew, I'll close the door. Just go check on the kids. I'll go close the door. So yeah, baby, what's your number? Candy gets a Sprinter van for everybody to ride on to the airport, so that way there's no excuses on who's late or who's possibly missing their flight over to New York City. And as soon as she said Sprinter van, I was triggered, and I remember the Real Housewives of Salt Lake City, and we all know how that went over there. So every time moving forward, anybody ever mentions anything about a Sprinter van, Salt Lake City will be the first thing that pops to mind. And Todd, I'm not sure if it was like 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, but Todd, he is obviously not a morning person, because he was just so over it. As soon as he got on the bus, he was just laying there with his head down, and it didn't make it any better when Sonia got on, because Sonia got in. She's obviously a morning person, because she was like, good morning, everybody. Good morning. Good morning. I'm a morning person. And you know, Todd was probably like, oh, why did they cast her on this show? Be quiet. So one by one, they all got on the Sprinter van. Drew got on, Sheree got on. Sheree's just like, oh, this is the first time I'm seeing Drew since the whole incident last week with the last episode. I don't know how this is gonna be. Kenya, she gets on and she sees that everybody has their husband. And she's like, wait, what's going on here? Like in her confessional, she is pissed at Candy. She's like, Candy could have at least told me, me being a single mother, she could have at least told me that I could have brought somebody or a date or something. And you know something about those flashbacks, they're gonna prove you wrong because they play the flashbacks. And Kenya, you heard when Candy told Drew, yeah, you could bring your spouse, you could bring your significant other. And then Kenya, you told Candy, oh, you know what? I might actually bring a date. So Kenya, you knew. So I'm not sure why you're playing like you don't know in the confessional. If anything, you had a couple of options. You had Brandon, your friend. I'm not sure where he went. You had Jamal Bryan. Is he coming or would he come? I'm not sure. Probably not. You had Peter Centerpiece Thomas. Would he come? Of course. He'll show up to anything. I mean, he'll show up if the wind blows the right way. And if worst case scenario, you also have Walter. I mean, I'm pretty sure he's somewhere in the dust. You could have called him up like, wait, can you fake being my boyfriend again just for like this weekend trip? So you had options, Kenya. So I'm not sure why you were so upset. Once everyone is settled into the van, Candy proceeds to tell everybody,
well, I was thinking, everybody, that once we get to New York City, that maybe we could have a dinner, and then tomorrow we could go watch the play. And I was thinking that maybe we could even go to New Jersey to go look at the condo that belongs to Todd.
And Todd, he was just over it. I mean, he was just knocked out. He was just like... But I'm pretty sure he heard that, and I'm pretty sure he at least appreciated that his wife is being a little bit open to seeing maybe, okay, maybe we could join this condo together. I mean, it's baby step. It's not all the way there, but it's something, right? So then they finally get to New York. They get checked into the hotel, and the concierge, the guy at the desk, he was pretty handsome. I'm like, Kenya, there's your date right there. Just ask him to be your date for the weekend or for like 72 hours. He was attractive. So they get upstairs. There's a bunch of food waiting for them. They all get plates of food and stuff, and they bring it out to the balcony, and they all sit around the table. Candy, she proceeds to tell them,
okay, everybody, well, hold on. There's a penthouse suite here, so we're all gonna compete for it in this game. So whoever tells me their wildest sex story is gonna get the penthouse suite, okay?
I believe we start off with Sonia. Sonia goes on to say that her and her husband, they had sex in the Mile High Club on a plane on their way to Dubai. And I'm like, wow, on a plane? I mean, have y'all ever done anything on a plane? Because the stories that we could tell today, but we won't. That's for a different time. And then we move over to, I believe it was Ralph and Drew. And Ralph proceeds to tell us that they had sex in the ocean next to a bunch of whales. All right, Ralph, if that's what you want us to believe, then fine, we'll go along with that. But okay, I'm pretty sure that Ariel, the little mermaid, I'm pretty sure she was at the bottom of the ocean just looking up at Drew like, Drew, leave him. That man is no good for you. He is toxic. When I was swimming by Florida, I saw him with another woman. Leave him. And then we move on to Sheree. Sheree said that she did it at a hotel in public daylight in front of everybody or something like that. And then Kenya, I'm not sure what this story was about because I'm pretty sure she made it up just to get the penthouse suite. She said that the guy that she was with at the time was really into hunting. So they went into the woods. They saw a trail of blood and they followed it, which led them to a cabin. An animal was inside. It was dead, but then it came back to life. The Blair Witch was also in there. Tom, he flipped his car 5 times. The whole story just sounded all over the place. But I will tell you this. It did sound much more believable than PK and Dorit's robbery story that they're trying to sell us in Beverly Hills, but that's neither here nor there. So then Candy was just like,
you know what? I think that the whole story is just a bunch of bullshit, but you know what? I'm still gonna give Kenya the suite.
So Kenya, she ends up winning the suite with her crazy, insane story. As everyone is getting ready for their plans later on that night, we see Sonia in her room talking to her husband, and she's like, I really don't know how to feel about Drew anymore, especially after seeing that she's willing to be okay with her assistant, Anthony, talking trash about her friend, Sheree, and she doesn't do anything about it. And honestly, Sonia, we shouldn't be surprised because look, she put him on probation after talking about her husband. So that tells you everything that we need to know about Drew. So we're already starting to see the cracks within that friendship. They head back into the van to head out to New Jersey to check out Todd's condo. And as they're in the van, Todd, he brings up the conversation and he's like, I just really like my condo. I don't want to sell it. I want to have it. It's my own personal thing. And then Candy, she's like,
well, I mean, Todd, what's the point of having this condo if it's so out of the way for us? I mean, it's very inconvenient. I mean, it's in New Jersey. We're never really over here. So why do we really want it for?
And Todd is just like, I mean, it's just like my own personal thing. It's my own personal space. I could come out here and I could, hang there by myself or whatever. And then Ross, Sonia's husband, he chimes in and he's like, yeah, I mean, it's like his own little man cave. I understand what Todd is saying. And Todd is just like, thank you. Somebody finally has my back. And then Sheree was so shady. I'm like, wow, Sheree, she's really working overtime this season. In her confessional, she's like, well, I mean, if I was Candy, I would be concerned too, because the streets have been saying that Todd, you know, he does go by Marvin in New Jersey, New York, allegedly. And they flash back to when Portia said it. And I'm like, is there some truth to that? Is that why he has his condo in New Jersey and he doesn't want to let it go? I mean, I don't know. I've never really heard anything bad about Todd or him being a cheater or anything scandalous like that. So the fact that all of this is coming back up to light, I don't know. I mean, the only time I heard it was when Portia said it. Other than that, I've never heard anything bad about him, allegedly. So that's that. If anybody knows anything otherwise, let me know. And then Sonia, I was shocked because she also agreed. She was like, well, I mean, if he had a condo in New Jersey and, you know, for no reason, I will also be suspicious too. And I'm like, Sonia, not you too. I thought she was the innocent one. And then Marlo, she was the one that put the cherry on top. She was like, I mean, yeah, Todd, he wants to be successful. He doesn't want to be in Candy's shadow, because that's the thing here too, that Todd, he keeps complaining about Candy doing X, Y, and Z, X, Y, and Z. But the thing is, Todd, you will be complaining too if she just stayed at home and did nothing as well. So, I mean, you can't have it either way. You just want her to, like, what, just be at home and do nothing? I mean, yeah, with all the money that she has, I would just stay at home and just do nothing. But she's not like that. She wants to be a working woman. She wants to leave her print everywhere. So, but Marlo, going back to her, she went out to say, I mean, yeah, he could be successful without Candy. He could do all that if he wants to. He could have his little condo, but he'll never be successful without Candy's money. And I'm like, Marlo, she said it, not me. I was like, yikes. I'm like, finish him. I know Candy probably texted up a long text message after seeing this episode tonight to Marlo. I mean, yikes, was it true? We don't know. They finally get to Todd's infamous New Jersey condo, and I'm looking around like, wait a minute, there's no furniture, there's no beds, no couches, tables, nothing. Everything is under construction. I mean, I thought that we were at Giselle Bryant's house for a second. There's just no way that Todd is bringing people over to this condo to try to have an affair with. Affair on what? I mean, there's no space. But then again, if you're a real nasty bitch, you'll find a way. Trust me. So they're all looking around at the condo, and I see the vision. I see the potential in the condo. And so does Bob the Builder, Kenya. Kenya's just looking around all over the place. She's like, you need to do this, do that, do this, do this. Like, she was just ready to give the whole place a makeover. So I was here for it. And I love the staircase of it. I love that spiral staircase to the whole condo. That is one of my favorite type of thing in the condo itself. They move it out to the balcony, and Ralph, of course, he starts playing around with Todd a little bit too much. He's like, oh, Todd, I know that you had a lot of fun out here on this balcony, like last weekend. And Todd, notice how he stayed quiet. Candy, she's like, so Ralph, you just think that that's funny, don't you? That's not funny. Don't joke around with me like that. Meanwhile, back on the inside, Marlo is telling the other women, I really don't understand Todd. All he ever wants to do is just be praised all the time by Candy. And I'm like, wow, Marlo, you really have it in for Todd. What did he do to you? So I wonder what Candy feels like watching all of this back and hearing Marlo shit talk Todd and her relationship behind her back. So they're all like, so Candy, what do you think about the condo now? Like, what's the final verdict? And she's like, you know what? I think if you really want to do whatever you want to do in this condo, I think that should be your decision. But, you know, I think it's cute for now. And honestly, I feel like once Todd just, you know, revamps everything and changes the whole layout, puts all new everything in there, I feel like Candy won't even look at it like, oh, you know what? This was Todd and his ex's thing. This is going to be a whole new thing once he fixes everything moving forward. We head over to this restaurant to have a dinner, and Sonya's the first one to bring up conversation between Candy and Drew. And she's like, how come neither one of you have your wedding rings on? And I'm like, how do you even notice that? And you're being messy, Sonya, and I'm here for it. Candy, she goes on to say, well, I never really thought about it like that. Drew, she goes on to say that after she gave birth, she still had baby weight on her finger, so the ring didn't fit. But even after she lost it, she still felt like her and Ralph were going through a rocky patch in their marriage, and she didn't feel like putting it back on. But can you imagine the biggest plot twist in this whole situation if Ralph was the one that was completely 100% faithful because he had his ring on, and Drew, she was the one that was secretly having an affair behind his back? Can you imagine that? She goes on to tell the entire group that her and Ralph are going through counseling right now, and they're not allowed for the next 30 days to be toxic to each other. They can't disagree on things. They can't bump heads like they usually do. They have to be on good terms. And Candy, I believe she's the one that started talking about the assistant situation, and she's like, well, I mean, the whole situation with your assistant was really strange, and you cut that off, correct? And Ralph is just like, it's understandable. I understand where Drew was coming from, but I feel like she was looking at it from a whole different perspective, and I'm like, here we we go again with him trying to manipulate the whole situation to make himself look like he was doing good. And Drew was the one blowing everything out of proportion. Kenya, she was looking at all of this, and I'm assuming she got triggered, and she was just like, you know what, Ralph? You remind me a lot of my ex-husband, Mark. And I'm like, huh. You know, I never really thought about it like that, obviously because they're both not in the same picture. Can you imagine if we have Mark and Ralph on the same season? Absolutely not. Like, no. I'll probably have to tune out. But honestly, I feel like Mark is still the worst out of the two. I mean, he still takes the cake for being like the worst husband on this show, or at least between both of them. What do y'all think? Do y'all think that Ralph is worse than Mark or the other way around? Let me know. So then she goes on to say, yeah, you remind me a lot about Mark. Mark will always manipulate me, and he will always try to degrade my feelings, and et cetera, et cetera. And I'm like, yes, Kenya, you're finally sticking up for Drew. It's so interesting to see her actually sticking up for her, seeing their past history on this. But she goes on to say she's trying to look at Drew from a different perspective moving forward. Ralph, he goes back with Kenya. He's like, no, but see, the thing is, I wasn't doing all of that. I didn't do anything to her. I mean, Drew thought that I was grabbing her ass. And then he started doing the whole awkward laugh. And I'm like, stop, Ralph. Kenya's like, what are you laughing for? What are you laughing for? There's nothing to be laughing about. Like, you're just constantly just over ruling her emotions. And you're just not validating anything that she's saying. Drew, she's staying quiet. Marlo, she sees that. And she jumps in. And she's like, I mean, well, yeah, let's not put all the attention on Ralph. But let's put the attention on you, too. You also have an issue in this marriage, too, because you allow this. You allow this behavior from Ralph. And honestly, yeah, Drew, I mean, yeah, he's terrible as well, but I'm not gonna say that Drew is terrible. She's not terrible, but she just allows way too much in her life. Obviously, it probably comes from insecurity, but you just let Ralph just do whatever he wants. He went to Tampa. He went to a whole different state for like, 3 days or whatever, and he never told you the real reason why, and you were just okay with that. You were just like, okay, you gave me that sorry excuse, that's fine, I'll accept it, and I'll move forward. Like, no, you're not supposed to do that. You let Anthony, your assistant, talk trash about, your husband and making up these false rumors or alleged rumors, whatever, and you're okay with that too. Like, oh, it's fine, I'll just put you on probation, I'll still keep you in my house. Like, no, you need to have some type of wall at some point. Like, you have to have some type of rules, Drew, and that's something that you're not understanding. Kenya, she also went on to say, Drew, I feel like you also don't know how to let things go. And Drew's just like, what are you talking about? Kenya didn't want to bring it up, and she's like, well, the whole situation with you and Sheree. Sheree was sitting right next to Drew, which I didn't notice. I'm like, well, that's interesting choice of seating. And then Sheree's just like, yeah, I mean, you really don't. And then Drew's just like, well, my rule is that don't start none, won't be none. And Sheree's just like, well, same thing for me. I'm like, look at Sheree. She was just ready for camera time. She was ready to go at it one-on-one with Drew. Drew's just like, yeah, but the thing is, I didn't do anything. It was just the whole assistant situation. Sheree then brings out her phone and she's like, well, look, I mean, we never finished that issue, but look. So Anthony had texted Sheree a picture of him and Ralph, or a picture of Ralph or something like that. And she was like, oh, look, this is Drew's husband. And I got more information on him. And I'm like, wow, Anthony, like, you're another trash bag to the collection. So then Drew's just looking at that like, what? Ralph is confused too. And then Ralph is just like, wait, what did Anthony say? And then Sheree drops it again and she's like, oh, that you're gay. And I'm like, here we go again, Sheree. I mean, it's already bad that Anthony's just spreading that around. It's bad that you're also repeating that to Ralph to his face. Like, that is just so disrespectful, and it's very ignorant. Just like I said in my last review last week, I just don't like the whole, oh, you're gay, being used as a negative thing. Like, stop that. Like, Sheree, you didn't really have to do that. You could have just dropped it, and that could have been Anthony's issue, or you could have just mind your business. I know you want to plot on this show, you want camera time, but to stoop this low again, no, it's not cute. And this is not the first time you're doing it on the show either. You've done it before, like I mentioned, with Kim Fields, and I never really liked that whole storyline. Ralph, again, what if he was gay, or what if he was bisexual? I'm not saying he is, but let's say he was. And so what? What if Drew already knows? And then what? Like, then your whole argument just looks stupid to begin with. So I just didn't really like that. But I did love that Kenya was sticking up for Drew, and how Marlo was also kind of sticking up for Drew. I just wish that Drew could stick up for herself and not put up with Ralph's BS anymore. And that was that, everybody. What did everybody think about this episode? And do you think that there's any hope for Ralph and Drew? Do you think that Ralph will change? Do you think that him and Drew could actually be good to each other for 30 days? Or do you think that they'll screw it up? Or do you think that he'll screw it up? I don't know. Let me know what y'all thought about this whole episode down in the comments. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Bye, everybody. Mwah.